Are you ready to untangle from your past, recover from heartbreak, and revive your life? This is Soul CPR with your host, Ann Papayotti. We've all had soul-crushing experiences and lost ourselves in our pain, but there is a way out. On this podcast, Amazon best-selling author, award-winning life coach, and advice columnist Ann Papayotti helps us navigate the path from heartbreak to healing. So now, please welcome the host of Soul CPR, Ann Papayotti.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. You know, there is a popular misconception about cheating, and it's one that ultimately hurts the betrayed partner. And that myth is that cheating is due to a lack of intimacy at home. And that myth, we're going to try to debunk today, folks. So welcome to Soul CPR. I do thank you for tuning in today. And this topic was actually a headline that was given to me to write an article about by my editor at YourTango, which is an online magazine that focuses on love and relationships and emotional well-being. And I was actually thrilled to have this headline so that I could research this topic because of how common infidelity is to heartbreak and to breakups in general and divorce. And I learned in my research that it's actually cited as the primary reason for the dissolution of relationships worldwide. Primary reason worldwide. And this, according to the research of Sean G. Jefferson and his colleagues in their study, which is published in Deviant Behavior. And in my own work, I find that the betrayed or the victim in the betrayal commonly feels confused when they learn of the betrayal, thinking that they had been in a solid relationship. A solid, trusting relationship. So wouldn't you know that these newer studies are actually proving what the betrayed already thought they knew, which is that they were in a solid relationship. So let's dive into this topic. Are you ready? Let's do it. Research actually proves that infidelity is not only quite a complex topic when you dive into it, but more often than not, infidelity is unrelated to passion and physical and emotional intimacy. No wonder people are confused when they've got passion and physical and emotional closeness in a marriage or in a committed relationship. Why would anyone expect their partner to be unfaithful? Okay. And these studies actually show there's minimal influence by the partner on the cheater. So hear me loud and clear. If you've experienced or are experiencing betrayal, it's not your fault. It's not. Rather, the choice to be unfaithful is driven by individual tendencies, says the research. And I hope you heard that word, choice, the choice to be unfaithful. So let's begin by defining infidelity in general. Why don't we? So infidelity is the act of betraying a committed relationship by engaging in behavior that violates the presumed or agreed upon boundaries of that relationship. So that can be the vows made in a marriage, right? Or it could be, just the expectation that partners in a committed dating relationship may have of one another, that whether they be spoken or unspoken, that they be faithful to one another, both emotionally and physically, right? So infidelity is any action that's going to break trust in these committed relationships. And infidelity is therefore going to involve secrecy and deception or lies. And therefore, this once thought to be solid relationship or seemingly solid relationship is now going to experience what? Conflict and consequences. Now, at best, the conflict is going to lead to the consequences of attempting to rebuild trust. And that is not easy to do because trust is the foundation of any healthy relationship. And it can only be accomplished as far as rebuilding when the cheater is truly remorseful and the betrayed is truly open to forgiveness. Again, not easy to do. And the worst consequence is going to be, a breakup and or divorce, right? And divorce certainly impacts more than the actual couple. If children are involved, extended family, shared property is going to be involved. So consequences are much further reaching than people think about in the moment. And perhaps the biggest consequence that I see, at least in my work, and it is also reported in the research, is the emotional well-being of the betrayed, the detriment to the emotional well-being of the betrayed. The emotional pain is intense and it can manifest into physical symptoms, right? And there can be depression and anxiety and certainly a loss of self-esteem. It's very, very prevalent. And one of the most common things that I hear from clients, I heard it last night, is how can I learn to trust again, ever? So this alone makes forming new healthy relationships difficult. Therefore, debunking this myth of what drives infidelity is important. It really is, because women in particularly, but men as well, tend to think they are not enough in some way when their partner betrays them. So we got to get rid of people thinking it's their fault if they're on the victim end of betrayal. And there is a study about betrayal trauma that also supports this work. So the pain of betrayal does what? It's going to spiral into self-doubt, and self-doubt does what? That's going to spiral into low self-esteem, and low self-esteem does what? It creates this relentless suffering in people's lives, emotionally and physically, as I said. I know for myself, I started experiencing, I had an ulcer develop, I had an eczema developed, I had skin conditions. So on the outside, I appeared to be moving forward. I had weight gain, I had all different, I had these skin symptoms, I had this ulcer. So on the inside, I was experiencing anxiety, and then these anxiety-driven manifestations were what people were seeing rather than see me break down, if you will. Okay, so who do you know who's been betrayed? How did it show up in their lives, or has it happened to you? All right, so it is very important to debunk this myth. And again, I've led support groups for separation and divorce for more than 25 years. And so I've seen firsthand how this misconception of what leads to infidelity can place undue blame and distress on the betrayed spouse. And one natural thing that starts to happen is that betrayed spouses will start to examine their lives and their marriages, and they start looking for things they could have done differently. So it's that would have, should have, could have kind of game that they play with themselves and go through this process. And it's part of grieving, actually. And while I encourage everyone to look at and examine and do what I call the autopsy on any relationship that ends, and look for their responsibility in what may have ailed the relationship. However, hear me loud and clear again. If you were betrayed or cheated on, it was not your fault. But if you were the betrayer, you are the one to blame. And by that, I mean, you are the one to bear the burden of the responsibility, okay, for the ultimate demise of the relationship. There's always shared responsibility, but you bear the burden of the demise. And we'll get back to what the responsibility initially was for you, okay? So back to the research. According to Jefferson's study, there were 3 things that I found really noteworthy for us to hear today. And one was that results showed that individuals who reported higher commitment to their partner were less likely to engage in infidelity. Individuals who were highly committed to their relationship were also less likely to engage in infidelity than those with lower commitment levels. So commitment in general and how someone values commitment is a deterrent. However, going back to what we were saying about debunking the myth, passion and intimacy in the committed relationship were not deterrents to infidelity. Interesting, right? So it's really the value of commitment over passion and intimacy, both sexual, physical, and emotional. So it's not the quality or the frequency of sex that's lacking that drives someone to infidelity in general. Now, we'll talk more about that a little bit later. And the third thing that I want to bring up from Jefferson's study was that individuals who simply believed without proof, that their partner was unfaithful were more likely to engage in infidelity themselves. So just thinking that they've been cheated on, listen to this statistic, 772% more likely to engage in revenge sex. Now, I hoped that that was a typo and that it was just 72% more likely. I kept looking, how do you get over 100%? I could not find anything that changed that number. But regardless, it's staggering. So just believing that you've been cheated on increased this study that people would engage in what's known as revenge sex. Wow. Okay. So revenge cheating could probably be an entire episode topic, but we're not going to go there today. Now, you recall also the word choice, that cheating is choice. So the choice to be unfaithful is driven by individual tendencies. So again, it's not about the partner, it's about the individual who chooses to cheat. So hear that loud and clear also. And we are going to explore what we mean by individual tendencies and what those mean. And I've broken it down into categories like internal struggles and personal insecurities and emotional needs. But remember, when we talk about these, that infidelity is a complex subject and a big range of things, and can result from a variety of emotional and psychological and situational factors. And a person may exhibit many traits that we're going to talk about that are linked to infidelity and still remain faithful to their partner, right? While others may lack these traits and become unfaithful. Why? Because cheating is a choice. It is approaching time for our first break, so I am going to hold off talking about each of these categories until we come back. So don't go far, and we will be back with more betrayal and soul CPR.
Mike Zorich, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorich, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorich has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today on Soul CPR. I'm Ann Papiotti, and we are talking about beyond the bedroom and really debunking the myth of infidelity and the fact that it is not actually related to passion and intimacy at home, but rather about the individual who chooses to cheat and about their personal struggles, their internal insecurities, and their emotional needs. So let's talk about what we mean by each of those. Internal struggles. I am thinking of different sociopathies, if you will. And the most common one that we tend to talk about in the support work I do and with clients is narcissism. So the narcissistic personality disorder is probably the one we're all most common with. I know the term narcissist is sort of casually tossed about in defining someone who is egotistical and self-serving. But narcissistic personality disorder is actually a diagnosis. But you can read about people. It is observational, and so I think a lot of people have felt that they have been involved with a narcissist at one time or another. But narcissists do have an inflated sense of self, if you will, and self-importance and entitlement, and that, when it's combined with a lack of empathy, can be very damaging in relationships. And so they tend to seek external validation through affairs because it boosts their ego, quite frankly. It simply boosts their ego, and they love feeling superior and admired in whatever way, and they have this sense of control, and they they don't expect to be found out either, because they're smarter than the average bear, if you will. So they're able to disregard their partner's feelings, and they will easily blame the partner if they're caught. They will easily give themselves an excuse to cheat. So narcissism is one of those psychopathies. There's others like borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. There's more. There's multiple psychopathies that will show up. There's what they call the dark personality traits in psychology, but things that I would say internal struggles that deal with lack of self-control, impulsivity, difficulty processing potential consequences may lead to a more vulnerable to to um, to infidelities. There's also the people who simply are thrill seekers. People who are prone to have this need for novelty in their lives. People who simply don't, again, value what? Commitment. Personal insecurities. What do I mean by that? Well, when I think of personal insecurities, now I'm thinking more about people who also have a need for validation, but unlike the narcissist, this would probably come from a lack of self-esteem. Okay, so this is going to come from people who need to feel attractive, valued, desired, and an affair can give that temporary boost for them in that way to their sense of worth or sense of self-worth. People who maybe feel just insecure about themselves in some way, and they're just seeking reassurance from outside of their relationship. Again, not processing consequences as well, but this isn't coming from a place of a psychopathy. This is coming from just a real neediness, a place of, I would call it victim thinking. They feel, when I say victim thinking, life is happening to me and not for me. And so this is seen as something for them in a way. I would also say personal insecurities could be fear of commitment. And what I mean by that, some individuals who struggle with fear of commitment could use an affair to avoid fully investing in their relationship. So let's say it's a dating relationship. So rather than, it's a way to block intimacy in a way. So rather than fully invest in a relationship, they're going to keep testing the water, see what else is out there. It keeps them from having to fully vest in with someone. Others may avoid vulnerability, and if they have difficulty connecting emotionally, it allows them to keep a distance from someone that they're committed to verbally, but emotionally they can't quite get there. So this way they have their other needs met, if you will. Another personal insecurity that might drive someone to infidelity when they're in a verbally or non-verbally but understood committed relationship might be a crisis moment in their life. And that might be a time of extreme stress or a major life change. And I mean something like a career setback, or maybe a death in the family or of someone close to them, some kind of personal crisis, even an identity crisis. People starting to feel more vulnerable in their lives may turn to an affair to cope with this emotional upheaval. And it doesn't make it right. We're just looking to understand, right? There's feelings of loneliness that will drive people to an affair as well. Now, this loneliness can come from perhaps some kind of isolation and even though they're in this committed relationship, they may seek companionship outside the relationship because they feel lonely in the relationship. So that's an unmet emotional need, which is going to be our next category. And we'll talk more about that. But these are more ways to explain. But this insecure feeling in the relationship that's led to loneliness. I mentioned earlier about sexual dissatisfaction will come up as an emotional need, perhaps. This or mismatched sexual desires in a relationship can be a reason, though it is not showing up as a primary reason in affairs. We'll talk more about that. What about neglect and feeling taken for granted? That again can be an unmet emotional need. But when people don't feel appreciated in a relationship, they may look out elsewhere for that validation, and that certainly can happen. Now, that fear of being cheated on or abandoned or rejected in the committed relationship, you heard me say that statistic for revenge cheating, right? So just the fear, the belief that the partner has cheated, leading people to cheat at such a high rate, it's astounding. So can you imagine? All right, so our third category that I created is emotional needs. So what are emotional needs? And some of those from insecurities come from an emotional neediness, really on a deep scale of neediness. Well, let's look at what are our true emotional needs, because we all have emotional needs to be filled in relationship with others. They're not all intended to be met by our intimate partner. Some may be met by social relationships, as in friends, by family, by networking with colleagues, but we all have emotional needs that are normal and healthy. So when I think about the topic of emotional needs and intimate partners, I think of the work done by Dr. Willard F. Harley, and he has a website called marriagebuilders.com. Lots of fantastic resources there. His books, I think his son even has a book. There's several books. There's lots of free resources as well. There are some like emotional needs questionnaire. It's available for you to take, for you and your partner to work on things together on. And in general, Dr. Hartley says that we all have the same emotional needs, as in males and females. The difference is how we rank them. And similar to love languages that you may be familiar with by Dr. Gary Chapman, which explains that we all express and feel loved differently, and that while we tend to show love to our partner and children and others the way we ourselves feel loved, they may not understand it because we may not be speaking their language, if you understand what I'm saying here. So it may seem like a foreign language, so therefore they may not feel loved the way we show love. So in that same way, we may tend to focus on our partner's emotional needs based on our priority of emotional needs, and they may feel like their needs are not being met, and vice versa. So what are our emotional needs? Well, I'm going to go over Dr. Harley's model of emotional needs when we come back from our second break. So don't go far, and we'll be back with more Soul CPR.
Dr. RC will share extraordinary resources and services that promote educational success, as well as making a difference in the lives of all social workers, as well as the lives of children, adolescents, and teens of today. She will have open discussions addressing many of the issues that we face about our youth and how being employed in the uniquely skilled profession of social work for over 18 years has taught invaluable lessons through her personal experiences. She will also provide real-life facts, examples, and personal stories that will confirm that why serving as a child advocate is extremely beneficial when addressing the needs of the whole child. Listen live to Dare to Soar, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network, and tune in radio as Dr. RC will provide thought-provoking information that will empower, encourage, and strengthen students, families, and communities across our nation. You can also visit her at soarwithkatie.com. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Thank you for tuning in today to Soul CPR. We are talking about the myths of infidelity and the fact that new research is proving that that the choice of infidelity, the choice of cheating, has nothing to do with passion at home. All right. Well, here we go. I am up to talking about some of the reasons that people choose to cheat. And when we get down to it, it's about the individual, because it is a choice, and it could be the individual's insecurities, it could be their internal struggles, their literal psychopathy, their emotional needs. And so I like the work of Dr. William Hartley and his I used his marriagebuilders.com website. I often use this in my work with individuals and couples for understanding their needs. And Dr. Hartley says we all have 10 basic emotional needs, but men and women in general tend to rank those needs differently. And then as individuals, of course, each individual is going to rank them differently. And then like the love languages, as I was said, we tend to cater to our own priority with our partner rather than understanding their emotional needs. So he says that our 10 basic needs that we all have are affection, sexual fulfillment, and I have to help some people understand that those are two very different things, but they are. Intimate conversation, recreational companionship, physical attractiveness, honesty and openness, financial support, domestic support, family commitment, and admiration. Now, could you guess which 5 are the top 5 for women in general and the top 5 for men in general? Because they are opposites. Wouldn't you know it? It's like the men are from Mars, women are from Venus kind of thing. So I'm just going to tell you, and what would be your top 5? Would you be able to rank them? What your top 5 are? Well, according to Dr. Hartley's research, women in general, again, there will be individuals who have a different top 5, but in general, women would say affection, intimate conversation, honesty and openness, domestic support, meaning help out with the household chores, and family commitment, which would involve things like honoring the family, quality time spent with the family, the kids, all of that stuff. All right. So affection, intimate conversation, honesty and openness, domestic support, helping around the household, and family commitment. I've heard people say there's nothing sexier than a man with a vacuum cleaner. Just saying. All right. Men, top 5 are the other 5. Sexual fulfillment, recreational companionship, physical attractiveness, financial support, meaning help me stay on budget, and admiration. There you have it. Does that sound about right to you, whoever you are? Sexual fulfillment, recreational companionship, physical attractiveness, financial support, and admiration. So, when we talk about unmet emotional needs can lead to infidelity, it's not the partner's fault that there's an unmet emotional need. Why? Because it is the person whose need is not being met's responsibility to communicate to their partner, hey, I'm feeling vulnerable. We're not talking enough. Or, we're not doing enough things, recreational companionship. We need to we need to find something to do together. We need to find something we both enjoy. Pickleball, I don't know, golf, water skiing. Let's find something we both enjoy, and we need to spend time together doing that activity. Or, you know what? Let's talk about sex. The kids are in the way, that I don't find our sex life fulfilling anymore. We need to talk about it. Rather than what? Cheating because you feel victimized by life, because you have an unmet need in your relationship, therefore you choose to cheat. Again, it's a choice. So know that research also shows that a high percentage of emotional affairs, and do you know what an emotional affair? I mean, it hasn't crossed the line yet into physical, will progress to physical, meaning sexual, if opportunity to do so exists. So opportunity has to be present as well. So what happens is, what we do know is the majority of affairs happen or originate in the workplace. Why? Because that's where people spend the majority of their time. So time plus opportunity equals what? Yep. Or no, sorry, I said that backwards. Time plus vulnerability equals opportunity to cheat, but it's still a choice. So that's when I encourage people to say, okay, you've got to be self-aware enough. So unless you have one of the psychopathies that's going to perhaps block you from the ability to foresee consequences, that you're impulsive, or that you are egotistical in some way. If it's about emotional needs, then you can stop yourself and say, I'm feeling vulnerable. I owe my spouse or partner a conversation at this point. I owe it to myself to say, we need to talk. I'm feeling admired by this person at work, and it feels really good. And, they're always complimenting me in some way. And you know what? And every time I'm leaving the house for work, we don't even say goodbye anymore because you're busy with this, or you're headed out to your own job, or you're taking care of the kids, or whatever it is. We're not connecting in that way. We've got to change something. Our relationship is now vulnerable if I'm feeling vulnerable. So that is what healthy people do to maintain healthy relationships. Emotional affairs can begin online when someone is in that needy place. When I said those insecurities, those personal insecurities, someone who's got an unmet emotional need of intimate conversation can have that online without even seeing someone, right? And just through words, when you've had an unmet emotional need and someone doesn't have, your partner doesn't have time to talk to you, they're so busy, and even with the right intention because they're trying to maybe provide for the family, and then you find yourself needing intimate conversation, and then there's someone offering that to you online, it's easy to get drawn in unless that commitment to your partner and to yourself and to your relationship is strong enough to say, whoa, that's feeling way too good. And I need to have a conversation with my partner. And if we can't do that ourselves, what do we need to do? We need to have a third party help us create what we need. So research, again, shows that that strong commitment to one's partner is the strong deterrent. It's commitment to the partner, to the relationship. And that's when I say also to oneself. I'm adding that in. But it all gets down to what makes him or her vulnerable. And the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, that any one of us can be vulnerable at any time to having an affair. But would we cross the line? Would we cross the line? The difference lies in commitment, as we said. Ourselves, our spouse, our partner, our vows, spoken and unspoken. Know that a healthy partner co-creates a healthy relationship. Relationships are co-created. That's why we call them partnerships. So you co-create it by communicating that vulnerability, as we said, out of respect for that commitment, out of respect for that person, out of respect for yourself, so you can heal the issue together before it becomes an act of betrayal and shattered trust. And that emotional toll that we described earlier that can be irreparable, right? So again, if you have or are experiencing this, the act of betrayal is about the betrayer and not you. It is not a reflection of your worth or the quality of your love. So let me say that again. You cannot give or do or be more. You cannot give or do or be more to prevent someone from betraying you, from cheating on you. It is never your fault. It is the choice of the cheaters alone. And just by shifting this perspective and understanding this, you can take control of your own healing process. And it is a process. And what we're trying to do today is reframe the conversation around infidelity so that we can all empower ourselves when we're feeling vulnerable. Recognize that we do have the power of choice and we do have the opportunity to intercept before any action is taken, and that we can stop this self-blame if the actions already happened, and we can stop the assumptions that the marriage or the relationship was deficient in some way, and instead look through this individual lens of of the person who chose to cheat. We can look at them as an individual and what was the psychology or the personality or the situational factors happening in their life at the time of their choice. So, in summary, the decision to remain committed to vows in a marriage or commitment to a partner is purely personal. It is a choice, and it's made situation by situation and moment by moment. And again, we could all be vulnerable. We just have to decide for ourselves where our commitment and how strong our commitment will be, or are we willing to take the risk of potentially devastating, take the risk of the consequences, if you will, and what we know about those consequences that we talked about earlier in the show. So again, we all have emotional needs. It's healthy to have them. They can't all be filled by our intimate partner. But we talked about 10 that are in our relationships that are important to be in our intimate partner relationship. It's the fact that we're going to rank them differently. They all need to be talked about. They need to be discussed. We need to know what's important to our partner. We need to ensure that we are doing our part and that they're doing their part to meet ours. This is about communication along with the commitment, and then finding compromise. So those are your 3 C's to a healthy relationship: commitment, communication, and compromise. And that is the prescription to prevent an affair, if you will. All right, it is time for our third and final break. Don't go far. We'll be back with some closing comments on today's show.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Mike Zorich, a 3-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a 6-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2 thirds, and 2 fourths. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorich, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorich has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Hello, and again, thank you for tuning in today for this important topic, because again, I find so much falls on the victim of betrayal, so much healing to be done, so much carrying the burden of shame and blame, if you will. And I love the research that's showing that so often it has nothing to do with happiness at home, if you will, or intimacy at home and passion at home. We really have to focus on the perpetrator of the infidelity. We need to look at that person's unwillingness either to communicate or to hold commitment of high value, and of what might be any diagnosis in their life and what's the situation that led them there. Can a relationship be saved following an act of betrayal? Yes and no. It depends on the health of the relationship prior to the act. And is there a pattern of betrayal in the relationship? Is it, one affair? Again, as I said at the top of the show, it's going to depend on if there's true remorse on the act of the cheater, if the betrayed is open to forgiveness. It's a long process to rebuild trust. Trust takes a lot of patience on both parties, but yes, there's research that shows that can also happen, but it takes two very incredible individuals for that to happen. Okay. But yes, relationships can be saved. It takes a lot of growth and learning, emotional maturity on from both parties to make that happen. But those are some of the strongest relationships afterwards. So it really depends on the two individuals in that situation. So I am curious at this point, what is your takeaway from today's show? What is your takeaway? I hope there are two things at least. And one is that cheating is a choice. It's always a choice. I don't care what the diagnosis is or whatever, whether you're the narcissist or you have, bipolar or any of the other psychopathies, or what your insecurities in life are, or what your emotional needs are. Cheating is a choice. If you are the one prone to cheating, you can be helped. That is also a choice to heal those tendencies. And the other takeaway I hope that you have is that the betrayed is not to be blamed. Again, I said everyone is to look for responsibility in any ailment in a relationship. Everyone has responsibility in an ailment, but not responsibility in the choice to cheat. There is a difference, okay? Because the responsibility is on the vulnerable partner to speak up rather than cheat, to break up rather than to deceive. Okay. Again, healthy partners communicate their vulnerability to one another and to work to resolve it before betrayal occurs. All right, couple things. The link to my full YourTango article on this subject, which includes links to all the relevant research that I referenced today, will be in the show notes for anyone who's interested in more on this topic. And so that will be, again, in the show notes. Now, as this episode of Soul CPR comes to a close, and this was one that I had to talk about because I hear about it so often in clients and in support group. I just want you to, again, remember that healing is not a linear journey, no matter what you're healing from. It is a process of profound transformation. So allowing yourself time and to cooperate with time in your healing journey is always important. If today's topic and resonated with you, then please do share this episode with someone else who may need a lifeline of their own. And if you would subscribe, rate or leave a review and help us reach more hearts. We greatly appreciate it. You can connect with me on social media at Skyview Coaching on Facebook or at Ann Papayotti on Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to know your thoughts and answer your questions if you have them, and your ideas for future episodes on Soul CPR. Okay, until next time, please find strength in your vulnerability and courage in your journey. And as always, thank you for listening. Breathe deeply, love openly, and live soulfully. Good day.
This has been Soul CPR with host Ann Papayotti. Breathe life back into your spirit with each episode, where she and special guests explore the relationships that hurt us and discover that healing can only begin with you. Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.